Hello everyone and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel and to Eddie versus the algorithm for Game Week 30. If you're new around here, make sure to subscribe. This is the series where we take on the computer, myself with my own free hit team each week and the algorithm with its own free hit team, and we see which can score more points in FPL and ultimately is better at fantasy football throughout this campaign. And one thing we are going to be introducing this week, which I've read your comments and taken feedback, is a recap system. So we're going to be taking a look, not only noting the points totals, but also having a look at how the algorithm and how I got on with our free hit team. So maybe some of you at home actually outscored us. You'll be able to see that in the graphics. So I hope you like that. And coming in next week too, we're also going to be introducing a scoreboard. I've just got to add up the totals from throughout the season so far, so we can see who's actually in the lead, myself or the computer. So there's been 29 game weeks so far. The score might be 17-12 or whatever. You'll be able to see that in the visual representation too. So I hope you appreciate those changes. Drop a thumbs up if you're looking forward to that. But we're having to looking at how the algorithm got on now in game week 29. And it's going to be a bit of an anomaly here because this is a very popular week for the bench boost and the algorithm doesn't have a bench boost. If it did, it would have scored 145 points with those 30 points there down there on the bench. Only Alexander-Arnold scoring 0 was the only letdown on the bench bit there. And James Maddison in the starting 11 on 4 points, the only real disappointment from the starting players. The captaincy, you could argue, was a bit of a disappointment too, going with March over someone like a Matoma. And then also Mohamed Salah, perhaps not the best performance from him that you'd expect from such a caliber of player in a double game week, but that was mainly down to Jurgen Klopp and the fact that he just decided to bench half his team, well, the majority of his team really, in that game against Chelsea. Other than that, though, it was a really good display, and 115 points was a difficult total to beat, and overall, I didn't manage to do that. 107 points was what I scored, with Luke Shaw being a one-pointer. Madison, again, in my team, I have Havertz up front as well, were the three that really let me down ultimately. McAllister and March didn't go for Matoma, so another one there. Lesson learned. Don't trust the stats. Matoma is just dead set. Eye test. Absolute baller. Go with him, basically, is the lesson learned there. And yeah, Havertz, going with him over Tony was costing me 7 points additionally, which would have taken it to being 1 point behind. If Luke Shaw had started that game against Brentford and actually, well, made it through the game against Brentford, I should say, then we could have been a lot closer to the algorithm's total as well. But there were a few silver linings, going with Steele, going with the Rashford captaincy, sticking with Ollie Watkins, who was quite an obvious call, but 17 points from him was a big result, but ultimately wasn't enough to beat the algorithm. As we head into game week 30, we'll see how that affects the overall scores next week, as mentioned. But let's take a look now at game week 30 and how the algorithm is going to be lining up for the game week coming. And it's a predicted points total of 60 this week for the algorithm. It did manage to absolutely annihilate its predicted points total last week. Well, it outscored it. But we'll head into this game week now and have a look. In goal is going to be David De Gea, which I think is quite an interesting pick to go for. I think United's clean sheet odds are high this week for good reason. They are going to be without Casemiro. They'll probably be without Luke Shaw now for what looks like a hamstring injury. But they still look very solid, especially at home. They managed to neutralise Brentford, especially in that first half. United looked very dominant. Everton haven't been scoring too many goals recently. That Michael Keane screamer was the one in that game against Spurs. So yeah, I think going with De Gea is a decent option. Not too much potential for, amazing save points, but he does get a decent number of saves in games and not much potential for bonus as well. But I do think that David De Gea is still a decent one-week punt. Whether he's a viable long-term goalkeeping option, I don't really think so, with the fact that we've got the blank game week 32 for Manchester United and other keepers in our teams right now who can basically cover those positions. Raya, Kepa, etc. Kepa's going to be an iffy one with Lampard coming in, but, we've got keepers right now. If you do need to make a keeper change, you could consider him if your other goalkeeper plays in game week 32, but that is a big if, basically, because you don't want two goalkeepers who don't have a game in 2 game weeks' time, because that would be a bit of a disaster. Unless you're on a free hit, of course, in which case, go for whoever you want. It doesn't matter if they blank in game week 32. But we'll move into the defence then and see who's lining up in a back three. It's going to be Concert, Mings and Chilwell, so a double up on the Aston Villa defence for that home game against Nottingham Forest, who we know are a lot worse on the road than they are at home. And Aston Villa have actually looked decent recently, and they have been a threat from set pieces too. Mings and Concert do seem to get on the end of things, and they're sometimes involved in second balls and whatnot. Mings and Concert aren't the worst options from that Aston Villa backline at all. And then we've got Ben Chilwell. Wolves away is a decent fixture for Chelsea in that one, and Chilwell's been really, really unlucky not to get any returns over the last couple of weeks. He's almost playing as a forward. He's that advanced at times in the Chelsea side. Whether things are going to change now with Frank Lampard, it looks like, coming in as an interim manager, we're yet to see, but it's hard to see Chilwell losing his place or even being taken further back down the pitch. He is just too vital to that Chelsea attack, and a lot of their chances are actually created by him. In the midfield, then, we're going to see a midfield four of Bruno Fernandes. James Maddison retains his place with Marcus Rashford and Kevin De Bruyne, the other ones in the midfield four. Fernandes was playing a little bit too deep for me to invest in him as an option at this point if I didn't own him. Everton at home is still a decent fixture, and he's always got the chance of grabbing a penalty, but he was almost playing just in front of the back four at times in the game against Brentford. United at home, when they're playing against this low block, I don't think he is the strongest option, and perhaps I'd be looking to sway away from him at the high price tag at the moment as we look to maybe bring in Erling Haaland again this week if he's declared fit. We're probably going to need those funds, so if you didn't go for Bruno in the double game week, I don't really see any point in bringing him in now, but could still be a decent one we put, and that's what the algorithm is predicting anyway. James Maddison for that Bournemouth at home fixture. They do still have a pretty poor defensive record on the road, Bournemouth, but they haven't been as bad as everyone's been making out, to be honest. Maddison hasn't been in great form recently, but you could say he's due a return. Leicester overall haven't looked brilliant going forward, but we know he is instrumental to that Leicester side. And with none of the forwards really nailed at the moment, him and Harvey Barnes are perhaps the only options you can consider in that Leicester team. We've then got Marcus Rashford, who doesn't really need any explanation. And finally, Kevin De Bruyne against Southampton. A really nice fixture for Man City there. The only real risk with Kevin De Bruyne is, I suppose, the slight risk that we've seen. He could be benched this season. With the Champions League coming up, it's kind of uncertain who's actually going to start for Man City. Like with Erling Haaland, even if he is fit, is he just going to be rested for the game coming up in midweek in the UCL? And then finally, up front, we're going to see a front line of Ivan Toney, Ollie Watkins, and Harry Kane. So interesting to see Toney retain his place, even though he's taking on a Newcastle side who have looked very good defensively. I do still think he could grab a return in that one, and with him being the most popular transfer out, you'd have to say, for Erling Haaland, I do think it is still a bit of a risk. It would have been a lot easier if he just got unbooked in that game against Manchester United, but he has still got that yellows cards ban looming over him if he gets one more. And of course, the betting incident, which we don't know when that's going to resolve, but it doesn't look like it's coming anytime soon for now. Ollie Watkins against Nottingham Forest at home is a no-brainer, really, and also a strong candidate for the captain's armband, as we saw in the quick guide video yesterday. I'd recommend going to check that out if you didn't tune in for yesterday's video. And then finally, it is Harry Kane who does take the captain's armband. Brighton at home, I don't think it's an easy fixture by any stretch of the imagination. They're pushing for top four, Brighton, and they have looked very good recently, scoring a lot of goals. Whether that could be a high-scoring game, I suppose we could see that with Spurs at home. Brighton, if they grab a couple, that could fire Spurs up to go down the other end and grab a few of their own. As we know, Harry Kane has been all reliable. He has been scoring consistently over the last couple of game weeks and throughout the season, to be honest. So he is a viable captaincy candidate, of course. Perhaps doesn't have the most high ceiling in the world, famous last words, with the fact that he could now grab his first hat-trick in however many years. But Ollie Watkins is the one that I'm going to be going for in my team. On the bench for the algorithm, before we move into having a look at my side, is Andreas, Castagna and Bueno. So some interesting options down there on the bench, as one of those is going to be making his way into my starting 11. I do like the look of Castagna as well, but it's Andreas Pereira who actually comes into my side. And I just think that West Ham have looked so shambolic at the moment, I wanted to go for a Fulham asset. And with Andreas, I know he's really, really dirt cheap, but I still think he's a great option for this fixture due to the fact that Mitrovic is out as well. Andreas will be on pen, so I was between him and maybe going for Vinicius up front from Fulham as a little bit of a punt, but I wanted the forward line that you can see here because if Erling Haaland's fit, I want him in my team. It wasn't quite enough there to put the captain's armband on Haaland, but I've gone for Ollie Watkins with Kane as vice, as we mentioned before. Midfield, I've gone with Rashford, and then I've gone with Jack Grealish, who's had a lot of consecutive starts now in the league for Man City. Whether he'll be subbed off early for the Champions League, I suppose there's a bit of a risk there, but he's a lot cheaper than Kevin De Bruyne, and he has looked really good in recent weeks. Harvey Barnes I've gone for over James Maddison. I just think he's got that little bit of form over going for Maddison. He has had better expected FPL points per 90 totals over the last couple of game weeks, so that's why he's come into my side over going for the central attacking midfielder. And then finally, in the defence and the back line, I've gone for an Aston Villa double up, but a completely different double up from Villa. Gone with Martinez in goal and then Alex Moreno, that left back, who has seemed to nail down that spot in the side and has a couple of attacking returns under his belt as well already this season. Plus then I've gone with Diogo Dalot over. I was going to go for Luke Shaw in this team until last night when he looked like he's pulled his hamstring. So I've gone for Dalot on the other side, who seems to have that spot whilst Wan-Bissaka is out at right back. He did have a few crosses into the box against Brentford as well that looked tempting another day. Maybe Marcus Rashford gets on the end of one of those. He has scored quite a lot of headed chances already this season. So yeah, I've gone with Diogo Dalot over going with someone like a Malacia, who does make the bench down there in second position, along with Harrison and also Pedro Porro of Spurs. But yeah, that's going to wrap up my team against the algorithm. As always, I predicted a few lower points than the algorithm team, but let me know down below in the comments. Do you like this new system, first of all? Let us know that and drop a thumbs up if you do. But also, let me know, do you think I'm going to outscore the algorithm this week, or is the computer going to get another win over me in game week 30? Team Eddie or Team Algo, comment down below, and I'll wish you all the best of luck for game week 30. Thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.